Using scaleZ, you can scale an element in the third dimension along the z-axis. Now, since all elements in CSS are two-dimensional, you might wonder how the scaleZ would actually scale an element if an element in CSS does not have any thickness. Well, as a matter of fact, scaleZ actually scales the elements along the z-axis. It's kind of like the z-axis itself is scaled, and then the position of the element on the z-axis will automatically be affected by the scale operation on the axes. In all honesty, the effect of scaleZ is more obvious when you have an element with a perspective set and one that is rotated in three-dimensional space or translated along the z-axis. I'll show you a couple of examples. Our HTML is similar to what we've been working on. We have a div with a class of original. Inside is a div with a class of box, as well as a unique class of B1, B2, or B3. I have some styles that I've set on these elements just so that we can have some formatting. On the first box, B1, I'm going to add some transform. I'm going to use the transform property of perspective, and we'll set that to 200 pixels, and then we'll add the scaleZ and set it to 2. If we save and refresh our page, you can see that all of the boxes look exactly the same. As I mentioned, scaleZ doesn't do much by itself. You need to use it in conjunction with another translation value. So we're going to add a rotate in the X direction, and we'll set that to 45 degrees. We're going to save, and now when we refresh, you're going to see a change that's going to occur on box 1. Now, to illustrate what's happening, let's go ahead and let's copy this rule and let's apply the exact same settings to B2, except let's change the scaleZ to 1. This is going to mean that there's no scaling happening. I'm going to do this one more time and I'll apply it to B3, and we're going to set the scaling to 0.25. This is going to make the object smaller. So when we refresh, you can see the difference. It's not necessarily scaling the object like you're used to seeing scale occur, but it's actually scaling the element along the z-axis. So you can see the effect of scaleZ on these three elements. They're all being transformed in the same way, except that they're being rotated in the X direction. I'm using the scaleZ function, and you can see how much bigger the first element looks. It's using a scaleZ of 2, so it's essentially scaling that up twice as much. Box 2 shows you the default parameters, and box 3 is showing you a percent value of scale. Remember that when you want to incorporate the scaleZ factor, if you don't incorporate it with one of the other transform properties, it's not going to do anything. It's also worth pointing out that when you define transform properties, the scale needs to come before the rotate. So if I was to flip these and set my perspective, then my rotation, and then my scale, and we come back to the file, you can see that no change is occurring. It's as if this element is not being affected by scale at all. So do keep this in mind. The order when you're applying shorthand, transform elements, you need to apply scale first and then the rotation.